And remember to look at the camera.
3, 2, 1.
Shit.
That was... Wow. You had one job, Carl. Let's try this again.
But the clapping doesn't do anything.
I know, but it's what you're supposed to do. I saw it on Podcasting 101.
No, you didn't.
Podcasting for Dummies. 3, 2, 1. There, we're in sync.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Peahen's Ponderings podcast.
Take number 316 today. Really. Like since 8 this morning. It's 5. Okay. It's 3, but it feels like 5.
It feels like 5. We're drinking, so it's after 5 somewhere.
You did not out us like that.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's 2020, baby. It's COVID everywhere. You might as well drink.
Drink whenever you want.
Welcome to another episode of the Peahen's Ponderings podcast. I'm your host, TJ King.
And I'm not.
This podcast is sponsored by the Spanish Peacock. And when I say sponsored by, I mean I kind of took over his video booth and his webcam, the shiny new webcam, and basically like his whole work area for this podcast.
Tripod and what else?
And most of your spindles. Anyway,
cool.
And now a word from our sponsor.
I can't think of a good word because
it was abscond.
Abscond just doesn't seem to work anymore. Abscond worked at 8 this morning.
Abscond worked before a beer.
Okay, cut. Ow. That hurt.
The fact that you managed to hurt yourself tying your shoes really never ceases to amaze me.
Okay, let's try that again.
So our sponsor doesn't have any words today.
He does.
And now a word from our sponsor.
Thermonuclear warfare. No, sorry. Let's try that one more time. Cut.
And now a word from our sponsor. And see, the sad thing was, after we've been through this so many times today, I was planning on not editing this. I thought we could actually go straight through.
Okay, hold on. Stop. Let's start again. And I will be... No, we'll start again. I'll be focused.
Focused. That could be your word for the day. And
no, what is going on with the planets?
Conjunction.
Conjunction. That's my word for the day.
Okay. And now?
No, we got to do the whole thing over.
No, I'm just going to cut back to, and now a word from our sponsor.
Okay.
At least that's what you think. And now a word from our sponsor.
Conjunction.
Thank you. Today, we're going to talk about why spindles wobble and what you can do about it. It's a topic that's very near and dear to our hearts. We're pretty passionate about spindles that have really great balance and spin very nicely, very zen experience to spin. So this is something that we've talked about in some of our live streams. And actually, that's why we're in the video booth for this particular podcast. It will be on iTunes, Google Play, Amazon podcasting service, all of those. But if you're listening to this, you're going to miss a lot of it because we're also going to have a lot of visuals. So definitely go check it out on my YouTube channel as well. Did I forget anything?
Pornhub, but
it's not on Pornhub. Nobody wants to see spindles.
But it can. You'd be surprised. Not that I know. I mean, a friend has stuff there, but wicked fellow.
Oh, I'm so sorry I asked. I do need to mention that everything we're going to be talking about today, as far as spindles and techniques and things like that, they're specific to Spanish Peacock spindles. So other spindle makers may have other techniques and other,
opinions.
and other opinions and manufacturing processes that may or may not. That what we're about to talk about may or may not apply to them. So just remember, whenever we're talking about everything in this particular podcast, we're talking about the Spanish Peacock segment of the spindle market, which is the only segment that matters.
I love you.
I know. First and foremost, we do need to clarify that sometimes a spindle wobble does not indicate that there's a problem with the spindle. Normally, that's what we tend to think of right off the bat whenever we say, oh, the spindle has a lot of wobble to it. But some spindles actually will have a certain amount of wobble or thrum as you're spinning just because of how they're designed. So it doesn't necessarily mean that there's a problem with them. For example, there is the Spanish Peacock bottom whorl. We're going to try to get a good... Oh, yeah, that's a great view of that. So that's a bottom whorl spindle. And it's got this knob at the top. And because of this shape, it allows you to either spin supported with the spindle resting on a bowl or suspended, taking the singles and doing a half hitch around the knob and then supporting the spindle's weight, or I guess technically suspending the spindle's weight from the singles yarn by use of the knob. Because of this knob shape at the top, the singles yarn is never going to come smoothly off the tip. It's never going to be able to get towards the center of that shaft, and there will always be a certain amount of rotation around the tip because of how that singles yarn is located compared to the center of the tip. Similarly, if you've got a Spanish Peacock Turkish spindle, exact same situation where we have a notch or a knob at the top that allows the spindle to also be suspended versus spinning it supported. And for the exact same reason, this projection that allows it to hang by that half hitch is going to cause just that tiny bit of rotation around the top of the spindle as the spinning is happening. Again, it doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with the spindle. That's just part of the design.
It's also a scenario that I hope to change very soon. As you and I were talking about earlier, the possibility of adding a groove into the bulb.
That would be pretty groovy.
Yeah, groovy. We'll see how it works.
Right.
I guess you'll get a new test spindle.
I was just about to say a volunteer's tribute. I'll take that one.
Yeah, you'll take it. Just learn how to wrap a turtle.
As soon as I have some fiber worthy of putting on my Turkish spindle, I'll give it a shot.
Because, I have people sending me applications and pictures of their turtles to try stuff out. So, I'm just saying.
I have some competition.
I'm just saying.
Is that what you're saying? Okay. So I specifically called out the bottom whorls and the Turkish spindles because of the knob that they have at the top that keeps the singles yarn from being as close as possible to the center of the shaft. So I was just going to take a second to show how some of these other Spanish Peacock spindles work. This is an example of a drop whorl or suspended drop whorl, top whorl drop spindle. And say that 5 times fast. And you can see how the pigtail hook.
It's frozen.
It is. Look at that. I wonder if my camera's overheating. Shit. Didn't feel that bad.
Okay. Seems to be okay now. Start again?
Yeah, with this part.
This is an example of...
This is an example of a Spanish Peacock top whorl drop spindle, also called a suspended spindle. And it has this pigtail hook, which is curved in such a way as to allow the singles yarn, as it comes up the whorl of the spindle, to then proceed through this curved hook in order to keep it as close as possible to the center of the shaft, so you do not have any of that wobble in a spin on this suspended spindle. And then looking at the other end of the spectrum, we've got a fully supported spindle, so there is no notch, no knob, no ability to use this thing in a suspended fashion. So it has an extremely narrow flicking tip, and that allows the singles yarn to stay, again, as close as possible to the center of the shaft to minimize the amount of wobble that you're going to encounter while spinning. So first I showed 2 examples of spindles that have a little bit of wobble intentionally by design, and then by contrast, how other spindles are engineered basically to try to prevent that wobble.
And the closer you can come to like a great wheel, spinning off the tip, spinning off the point.
Right. I imagine if you could get that even thinner, it would be even better. But that's that's a pretty thin tip.
The problem with getting it even thinner is people are rough on equipment.
You know
and
what? I've
it
also known
snaps.
people to hurt themselves.
I have.
So if you get it too
I've
fine and too
actually
sharp,
had people complain about it's too sharp.
don't name
But
any names.
No, I was
Okay,
going to say
I was
that we do
we
have.
don't want to know.
We do have one customer in particular that likes them somewhat hypodermic needle-like.
Huh.
And I redid one of her spindle tips at Shenandoah Valley, the last wonderful
A real
in-person
show.
show we had. And I
anyway.
kept sanding, and she's like, sharper, sharper. Alrighty then.
It's not necessarily a thing a man wants to hear.
No, that would be smaller, smaller.
Definitely not.
Okay, back to serious.
So those were a couple of examples where a spindle wobbles by design. Most of the times, however, when we're talking about a spindle that's wobbly, it's not on purpose. It's not intentional. It's not by design. There's been something that's gone wrong.
It's not desired. It is not loved.
It is not good. We do not want this. And so that can either be something that happens to the spindle, or it is a characteristic of the spindle from the very beginning, as part of the woods involved or the manufacturing technique. Sometimes it can be introduced after the spindle has been made. So let's talk first about what can make a spindle wobble from the very beginning. Like
the biggest thing would be when you're working with highly figured woods, especially woods that a scenario of a dark and light wood, something like zebra wood or Asian ebony, black and white ebony.
And we'll say the same thing that we say every single time we talk about Asian ebony. If you're going to Google it to look for other pictures, make sure to use the word wood or lumber in your search.
No, make sure to use the word lumber.
Lumber, probably
Wood
better than wood.
Wood is chancy at best.
Right.
But yeah, and don't do it at work under any circumstances. And if you're really worried, use an incognito browser, because you can get stuff that, should you ever run for office, could come back and haunt you.
Right. So this particular spindle is named Wobbly Boy. He's actually my only spindle to have a name. And if you watched like my supported spinning fashion show, where I talked about my top 10 favorite supported spindles, Wobbly Boy was definitely in there because he's extremely photogenic. But as we were just mentioning, because of the different densities of the wood in the whorl,
Asian ebony is actually an exception in the world of wood, because the light part of the wood is almost reached the point of spalting, where the black grains in the wood are totally solid, rock hard, not going anywhere. So you can come up with just unbelievable, even with grains that seem to be even. It's a total roll of the dice anytime you work with a wood like that. You've got other things like zebra wood. The dark in it is a lot denser than the light. So if you don't have grain that's evenly spaced and consistent in ring size.
And this is an example of a Russian lace spindle made out of zebra wood. And just to point out what Mike's referring to, you can see the variation in the hardnesses or densities, I guess,
and
of
the
the wood.
and the thicknesses of the rings. I mean, it's figuring in growth rings, things like that.
Right. And with this particular Russian lace spindle, you can see, like, it's really clear on the camera.
Well, and that
just
one
exactly how
that one
bad it
had
is.
multiple problems. That one, it didn't balance when it was born.
Is this the one where we're trying to figure out how to...
Yeah, well, it didn't balance
Show
when it was
on the-
born because
I don't know if you guys can actually see how crooked this poor spindle is.
some of the dark rings were a lot thicker than the ones on the other side, so that gave it thrum to begin with. And as that one actually spent a lot of its life in a vase. So that's what gave it the extra bend. And at some point, it was taken out to be used for something and never found its way back into the art display.
Modern art.
Modern art.
Modern art.
No, burls, highly figured woods. You never know what you're going to get just because the densities and the weights of the grain are so different.
Now,
You take a chance every time. After in time you learn to know what to look for, and you can look at a piece of wood and tell there's a 70% chance that this is going to work, and there's that 30% fail factor.
And you can actually tell a lot of the time before you even put the whorl on a shaft, before you finish making the spindle. You already can tell most of the time if it's going to end up causing a problem.
I won't even cut a blank out of something that's got more than a 30% fail factor, and even after that, I'll rough turn the whorls and just spin them on a shaft and get a better idea if there's any chance it's going to be salvageable. Sometimes you can salvage it. So you can take a spindle, a whorl that's going to have a little bit of wobble because of the grain, and you can match it to a shaft that's going to have a little bit of wobble. And as long as you find the right position, then you've got that little tiny window that might allow it to work. Otherwise, it becomes yours or art.
Or you never
stuck
even,
in the wall,
or you never even finish
or I
the
never even
spindle.
finish it. I mean, I've got a tote full of unfinished whorls. Ones that just, as soon as you gave them, and sometimes it's surprising. It can be holly or boxwood or something that is so vanilla, as far as the grain pattern goes. You'd look at it and go, okay, this is going to be perfect, and it doesn't. It always wobbles, or it does wobble.
Right.
So.
Well, and sometimes the problem is because of the shaft as well. So we've talked a little bit about whorls, and we've actually talked about the shafts too, as far as woods with differing grains go. But sometimes when you cut a piece of wood into shaft blanks and then use those shaft blanks to actually turn spindles, things go wrong there as well.
A lot of times it does. When I cut shaft blanks, I like to let them sit in the shop for 4, 5, 6 weeks, and just let them relax. Let the tension come out of the grain after they've been cut. A lot of times that's not enough, depending on the type of wood, depending on the relative humidity in the wood.
Right, because apparently woods are wet. That's something I learned today.
Woods are wet, and woods are alive. They expand and contract, and
so I don't know how well you guys can see this in the video. We've got a cell cam set up. I almost said something I didn't mean to say. We have a cell cam set up so that you can actually see the spindles a little bit better this time. So this is a holly bead spindle on a lignum vitae shaft, and as I flick it, you can actually see how much that tip just skips around. Because when this spindle was made, you were telling me the piece of wood actually hadn't dried out quite enough yet.
No, it hadn't dried out enough. It still had. It was a block that I'd gotten that had waxed ends, and waxing is a technique that the people who harvest the wood use to keep the blocks of wood from checking as they dry. Checking is splitting along the grain.
Okay.
You get cracks in it. It's depending on how the wood is dried out, it's the nature of the beast. Lignum vitae, a lot of times, is cut green, and in order to make their money, they will wax the blocks, so they'll dry out slowly. A lot of people like to turn green wood. It doesn't do anything for me.
It's already green.
Nice. But yeah, that one, when it was finished, spun perfect. It was beautiful. But because of the different conditions, changing conditions between
maybe,
outside in the middle of summer and inside in the air conditioning. I don't even remember how old that spindle is, or what time of the year it was, but yeah, just the different atmospheric conditions.
And that's too bad too, because this was a nice piece of summer cut holly.
That was one of the last pieces of thick summer cut holly.
Oh no.
Summer hut collie.
So, and we're starting to lose the cell cam again.
It's because we're in a Faraday cage.
Yeah, it could be. So the summer cut holly has a bluish gray tint, as opposed to the winter cut holly, which is more white.
And in most cases, people find very undesirable. In what I do, I love summer cut holly.
Well, I think it goes very nicely with the greenish blue color of the shaft as well.
Shafts warping.
shaft warping,
There you go.
right? We were talking about the differences in grain, moisture being in the wood, changing conditions, but we'll come back to the changing conditions because primarily what we're focused on right now is manufacturing, like knowing in the process of making the spindle whether it's going to balance or not. So one of the things that you used to do back in the day, hold on, I gotta remember to look at the camera or at the mic when I'm talking because
the star.
because if I'm looking at you and talking or looking
Nobody
at the
hears
wall
you
and
and it
talking,
sounds
nobody
weird.
can hear me. Right. So one of the things that Mike used to do.
That would be, see, the total reason to get the wireless mics.
Oh no, I'm sold on the wireless mics. It's just a matter of
We're upgrading again. Because, you know.
just like every single time we've done a live stream or a podcast or anything, it's always got to have one new piece of equipment each
It's
time.
so funny because when you look at the video, it seems like we have it all together and everything's this nice
This is
black
such a mess.
backdrop. If you could see the table in
such
front
a
of us
hot
right
mess.
now, it's like,
Like there's no room. Like
Whoa.
if one of us sneezes, just like everything would be covered because there's.
I don't have my
Because
spray bottle
there's-
here.
Yeah.
Anyway, back
Anyway.
to on track.
So-
Stay on track.
Right. So one of the things that he used to do, and I don't know if I can get this to focus. No. Oh well,
Well, you're not even
I was
on
on
there.
the wrong part. Anyway, there we go.
There they are.
There they are.
Right here.
Right there. Do you see that right there? So those are pins,
Pins of shame.
little brass pins that were added to this particular whorl. This is a ninja spindle, so the cross between a bead and a Tibetan.
I think that's the only ninja I ever did that to.
Maybe.
That was
Most of the other ones I have with
Australian
pins
cypress.
are Tibetans, and then the one bottom whorl. But you can see because of the Australian cypress, it's got the differing densities. It's a burl wood, so it inherently was not likely to balance. So he put these pins in to help make it more likely to balance. But overall, he found that for the most part, the effort of putting the pins in wasn't worth the probability, shall we say, that they would actually end up making the spindle balance.
Now, for what I'm doing, I mean, you don't know. I was limited to what I had on hand as far as brass went. I know there are some people who use like a eighth or a quarter inch pieces of brass that are cut to specific thicknesses, and they know what they weigh. I was just kind of winging it,
Right.
and
This
I
bottom
just
whorl has the
wasn't
pins in it too.
wasn't real happy
Can't see that.
with the way everything
Okay.
turned out, so just decided I'd rather not.
If you ever find a Spanish peacock spindle in a D-stash that features a pin in it, you know that it's very, very old. There have been some that were made that balanced.
Probably no more than half a dozen.
But I mean, they're out there. One
Yeah.
of them came home to us not
If
that long
you
ago.
if you
so
find one, it's definitely a rarity.
it's an antique.
And I'll be happy to swap you something for it if you have one.
You're trying to bury the evidence.
Yes, I am.
Hide it so nobody knows
Bury
what
it
actually
deep.
happened.
I own
and-
the ghosts.
And then I ruin it all by exposing you up on podcasts.
No, it's a viable. There are a lot of people that will use weights to balance spindles. They'll hide them behind something pretty, like a little chip of mother of pearl or something like that. There's absolutely nothing wrong with it. I'm just not good at it. So
Right. Well, and that's always been one of your
I don't wanna do it.
philosophies as a spindle maker. Don't do the things that you're not
Exactly.
good at. If people already have that market covered, like ceramic whorls or glass heads on supported spindles,
Right.
let them have that, and you
and
take
if you
care
can,
of everything else.
if you have the equipment and the knowledge and the desire to balance stuff out behind plugs or with brass pins, then yay. As long as the spindle works, that's all
Right,
that matters. It's
right.
just not something that I'm good at and don't want to do.
So one of the questions that we get a lot, we've talked about all sorts of different situations where where he makes a spindle and it ends up not balancing. One of the questions we get a lot is what happens to them. And one of the conditions depends on what the spindle is. So if it's something like very, very vanilla, very boring, very basic woods.
Cherry on a walnut shaft.
Yes, something like that. Then he usually doesn't bother with them. They're more likely to become mine because they're not worth.
Cherry on a walnut shaft is more likely to start a fire.
Well, that is true too. Something like this guy. This is a Carillion birch or Mosser birch bead spindle. You can see he's got the same very attractive shape as Wobbly Boy. The amount of thrum he has is not that bad, and he's been getting better. We'll talk more about that a little further on. But so this is a spindle that's pretty enough that someone who had the opportunity to try it in person might be willing to go ahead and accept that amount of thrum because he's just a really pretty spindle.
Somebody who's an experienced spinner.
Well, or somebody who just really fancies it.
Yeah, I mean, I would. It's
Right.
not something I would want to send to somebody who is just learning because
Well, no, but
you need to learn where your boundaries are.
point being, this needs to be sold at a show
Yes,
only.
absolutely.
You can't sell something. Spanish Peacock won't sell something like this online with even that amount of thrum because someone needs to try it in person to really decide that that's an acceptable amount of wobble for them. Now, of course, we haven't had a single in-person fiber show the entire year, thanks
We're
COVID.
going on 10 months. No, we haven't had an in-person show since September of last year.
Yes, that's correct, for Spanish Peacock.
Wow.
So Shenandoah Valley Fiber Festival in 2019 was our last in-person fiber show because our first in-person fiber show would have been Homespun Yarn Party March 22nd. And that was right as everything was starting to fall apart.
Right as I was able to start walking again.
Right.
Because that was right after we got sick.
Yep. So the in-person show-only spindles are just kind of accumulating. Hopefully at some point in the near future, we'll actually be able to have in-person shows again, so spindles like this one will be able to find a good home.
Yeah.
Or I just keep it.
Like you're going to give up your spindles.
That one is actually
That
marked
is
as an
a
in-person-
show only, right?
That is marked as a show only. He's got his little tag and everything. So,
Oh, okay.
Yep. He's legit. I haven't stolen that
He's
one
documented.
yet. He's documented. That's
He's
funny.
in the inventory.
Yes, he is. So, and that kind of alludes to what happens to the rest of the spindles that are determined to have too much wobble to be sold. They become mine. So,
Actually, they don't. They go into a big jar, and she comes and steals them from there.
sometimes they never even make it to the jar.
Well, I give them to you to put in the jar.
Hey, how does this feel? It feels like mine. Why do you ask? So I actually have a method to this madness. I save the spindles. I take them to classes when I teach supported spinning classes primarily. And that gives the students an opportunity to try out spindles of different weights, different shapes, sizes, different wood densities, like a heavier whorl and a lighter shaft versus a lighter whorl and a heavier shaft. And a lot of times the students actually will get the chance to adopt them. So I call it the Peahen second chance for second spindles. So it's an opportunity for students to try different spindles, and then, they can adopt them into their own flock if they find that it really speaks to them. But we haven't had any in-person supported spinning classes this year either. In fact, that was technically the first Spanish Peacock casualty. Not Homespun Yarn Party, but technically my supported spinning class the week before.
Right.
So March 15th was when that class was scheduled, and March 13th was the last day that the kids were in school. And it was around that Wednesday that I talked to the lady who was organizing the class, who was hosting it for me. And I was like, maybe we should just reschedule it for a little bit later when everything calms down. And here we are, 9, 10 months later, and things still haven't calmed down. We won't get into that. But when we talk about the Peahen's ever-growing spindle collection, in my defense, a lot of them are the seconds that would end up going to a class and potentially find new homes there.
Right.
Right. So we can't sell them as Spanish Peacock Spindles, but they can be adopted as Spanish Peacock Spindles.
You did that once at a show.
Oh, where I put out a bunch of seconds?
We were at like Maryland Sheep and Wool or something when we were just out of Spindles. And
We were completely out of Spindles.
Put out
So
a tote of seconds, and we were
but
out of those too.
I think at a discounted rate though, right?
Oh, yeah, we
like
were
half
selling it
off or something.
And people were still snagging them up, which I, at that point, just wanted to go hide in the truck.
Right. Good old Maryland Sheep and Wool. So what we've been talking about up until now. Stop playing with your cord. That's rude.
I'm not playing with my cord.
You were.
It's touching me. Mom, it's touching me.
Unfortunately, it.
Oh no.
What?
Why would you do that?
Why not?
Because I can't do a podcast in an elf voice.
Shit.
Not nice.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you. Nobody would take me seriously if I tried to podcast in an elf voice. I see that hand. Don't do it. Mike,
What?
don't do it.
Mike? You touched the knob.
Tell me. You cannot tell me that this isn't better. Seriously. The elf voice. Come on.
Not seriously. There's nothing serious about the elf voice.
Okay.
Okay. Oh, thank you. Now we can actually be serious again. Appreciate that. Keep your hands off my knobs,
Okay.
especially while I'm podcasting.
Right.
So,
Novelist.
what?
Novelist.
Knobless? I thought you said Nautilus, and I was so confused.
I need a little teeny baby Yoda, and I could put him up there, and then anytime Elf Voice came on, it would be his fault, not mine. Just saying. Okay, let's finish this.
I
'cause
mean,
it's
I know
like
we were
getting
talking
dark
about
at some
needing to
point.
have additional business expenses for 2020, but I don't see that
Baby
being
Yoda?
one. Yeah, no.
Mandalorian helmet,
No.
lightsaber.
Oh, I could do a podcast in a Mandalorian helmet, and then I wouldn't be all distracted by, like, my bangs being,
This is the way.
right? And how gray my hair is getting,
This is the COVID.
right? No, that's how round my face is getting,
Yeah, this is the beer.
right?
All right,
Right.
let's go.
So anyway, everything we've discussed up until now has been talking about Spindles, primarily has been talking about Spindles ending up with Wobble in the course of being manufactured, like before they get inventoried or posted to the website or shipped to customers. Unfortunately, stuff does happen, things occur, and Wobble can be introduced into the Spindle after the fact. So we'll talk about a couple of situations that may do that. We've already kind of alluded to one, and that's the changes in temperature. So either going to extreme heat or extreme cold, or changes in humidity. And this is part of the reason why we will not do outdoor shows with Spanish Peacock Spindles, because we just cannot subject the exotic woods to the possibility of rain or wind or extreme changes in temperature.
Yeah, that was a painful lesson to learn too.
Yeah, that happened over very many Penzics, I believe.
And Penzics and other things as well.
Yeah.
I mean, there were other events where we were trying to set up under an awning or something like that. And rain happens.
Right. So, for instance, we were trying to get into Maryland Alpaca and Fleece Festival last year, which if we had, then that would have been our last show of the year. But while they did have indoor spaces, they just didn't have any available for us. And so they offered us one of the open-sided barns, which, just we couldn't set up in anything like that. And I believe there are other shows that don't have any indoor spaces at all, like the Montpelier,
Montpelier.
the Fall Fiber Festival, I think it's called. And people have asked us why we don't do that one. And it's just because it's all outdoors. There's nowhere that's going to be protected enough for Spanish peacock spindles.
The simple fact of the matter is you can't go into a show with $10,000 in inventory and plan from the get-go to lose 3 of it.
Right.
It's just not smart.
Not viable.
Not viable.
Yeah. So individual spindles can also suffer from changes to heat and humidity. We've already touched on, like with the lignum vitae bead, for instance, the fact that the reduced humidity inside the house caused the spindle shaft to curve slightly as it continued to dry out. So we are very careful when we pack up spindles to ship to people. If you've ever ordered a Spanish peacock spindle, you know how much bubble wrap goes into one of those packages. But one of the things that we can't control is the conditions on the truck, how long USPS leaves it in the box, in the crates, on the back of the van, parked outside of Baltimore for weeks.
Yeah, in Baltimore, they wheel the carts off of the delivery trucks and they put them into like Connex boxes, big steel boxes.
Right.
And they stay there for...
Well, this Christmas holiday shipping season, we've had spindles there for weeks.
Yep.
And, we're in Maryland. Obviously, Baltimore's in Maryland. And the temperatures can go anywhere from up to the 50s and 60s one day down to the teens a couple of days later.
Right.
So there's no way to really protect spindles from that kind of changes, those kinds of changes. One of the other things that we've run into just within our own house, inventory that had been posted to the website being stored in the basement, and then it got cold enough to to start the wood stove. So we would have a fire making the basement suddenly very warm and even drier. So some of the spindles that were stored down here ended up developing
and really
some issues.
Super vanilla spindles too.
Yeah, a bunch of boxwood.
Boxwood.
Right. So
there were several pieces that were lost because of that.
Oh, and what was that thing that people were saying to do with packages much earlier this year? I haven't heard this one as much recently, but about leaving your packages outside?
It was actually on the Support Spindlers group that somebody said, because of the COVID fears and COVID sticking to packaging, to leave your packages out in the sun for 4 hours. And
because the UV presumably would kill any germs.
I squawked. I mean, I actually went online and said, please
don't do that with a Spanish peacock spindle box.
Please don't.
Yeah, because the direct sunlight would actually be extremely bad for the spindles.
No one here has it. If you want to unpack it outside, that's fine.
Right.
Unpack it outside. Leave the packaging out there.
Right.
But
don't
take
leave
the spindle inside and keep it safe.
Yeah. Right. Because really, really hot temperatures, really, really cold temperatures, increased humidity, extremely decreased humidity, any of those things can end up causing issues.
Exactly. Wood is a living thing. It expands and contracts and it does its thing.
Right.
Like me.
Yes. You do your thing.
Oh, never mind.
Wait, which thing are we doing?
Edit that. The whole cold thing. Edit that.
So anyway, back on topic. One of the other situations that we've run into a few times that can lead to a spindle developing wobble is improper storage. And so what we're talking about here is based on our own experience and things that we've encountered. It's not universally true, but a lot of times we do find that spindles that are stored in an incorrect manner can end up developing warp, or the shaft will warp and it'll introduce wobble to the spindle. Again, not guaranteed universally that it's going to happen, but it definitely increases the likelihood. And we actually
this is like one of the most controversial things that either of us ever says.
Right. So everybody's going to be really angry.
Because there are a lot of people that store their spindles in some of the manners that we're talking about.
The way that you have wrapped your headphone wire around you might make it a little difficult for you to grab Exhibit A over there. Whoop, see? It seemed like a good idea at the time to get the wire out of the way.
There you have it. So here we go. We're unwrapping from the wire. Exhibit A.
Exhibit A. This is how we do not store spindles.
And yet.
And yet.
Here we have
Okay,
this thing.
no, but for the record, the reason we have spindles in a vase is because these were all spindles that didn't balance in the first place. They were already
Some of these are
ruined.
like 15, 16 years old too.
They already didn't balance. They already just were basically unusable as spindles.
A lot of them damaged by weather.
Yes. This is an example of a Russian that also had the differing densities of wood that we were mentioning.
Heartwood versus barkwood.
Right. So these were already structurally compromised and yes, I know it's not actually a vase, but it functions just the same. Even if you put rice in the base of this, please do not store your spindles this way, especially if you've invested in a Spanish peacock spindle. Would you like to do the physics discussion, or do you want me to do the physics discussion?
You can do it. Just and a vase, mason jars, anything you have. Again, my humble opinion, it's bad. Just don't do it.
Wait, no.
Oh,
Physics.
physics. Okay.
We're going to have a technical discussion now.
Well, we'll take one out. Let's go physics. So, picture, if you will, my hands being a jar. You have
We have a jar.
a fixed anchor point,
The bottom of the jar.
bottom of the jar. You have the weight of the spindle. You have a fulcrum or leverage point here.
Where the shaft rests
So
against
this is
the
sitting
lip
there. It
of
can't
the
go
vase.
any further, and gravity starts to pull all the weight down, resting at that point. It's going to warp. It does. You can see.
Same
It
sort of
works.
thing, storing a spindle, like just laying flat on the ground or a table or whatever. Same sort of situation where you're going to introduce a bit of warp into the shaft.
I know a lot of people will put jars out with rice in them, and they'll stick their spindle straight up and down in a jar. And that's fine.
Well,
if
and
you
straight
can
up and
do
down
that,
is all right.
straight up and down is great.
What's not okay is when it's leaning like this and putting pressure on the
Right.
shaft.
It's great for modern art. If you've got a bunch
Yes.
of old antique spindles that you don't ever want to use again, which is what these are.
Yep.
And I've got several of these around the house, although one of the children keeps stealing the spindles out of it.
That's true. They've got a few fewer spindles than they used to.
It's great for modern art, but if you want to actually use the spindles that are in it, please
don't store them that way. So what are your alternatives? Basically anything that results in the spindle hanging straight up and down with no pressure on the shaft is what we recommend. And we do have, because we are so obnoxious about this whole point, we have come up with a couple of different options as far as solutions go for how to better store your spindles. If you could,
Which option would you like first?
the furniture, please.
Furniture.
So this is a scaled down version of the spindle furniture that we would normally sell at shows. The full-sized version holds 12 spindles, and the uprights nowadays are actually turned to look like Russian spindles. So it's a really cool effect. And there's these divots at the bottom. I don't know how well you can see those, so that the spindle can either rest tip down with the shaft going through there or going the other way. Here's our model wobbly boy, and you can see he can just sit right there. And then those are your two different options to store spindles in a piece of storage furniture like this. And the reason we call it furniture is because this is a display piece. This is the kind of spindle stand where you would put it out on a coffee table or somewhere else that's relatively prominent to show it off, and to show off the real highlights of your spindle collection, because it's a showpiece. Now, generally speaking, we only do these at in-person shows because they're really expensive to ship. We have sold them through the website before, but if we ever have in-person shows again, it's really better to try to pick them up at an in-person show to save yourself on the shipping costs. Now, if you want something more subtle, we also have the slim spindle storage stands. So these actually, ship flat, and you have to assemble them. There is a video tutorial that I did on how to assemble them, and I'll include the link for that so that you guys can get to it if you need to see it. This holds up to 5 spindles, same as the other one, same as all of them really, right? There's a divot at the bottom if you've got a serious case of plycrastination like I do, so you're just accumulating massive numbers of spindles with cop on them. Hey, look, it's Wobbly Boy again. I'm here to spin, not to ply, so sometimes it takes me a while to get around to it. So you can store a spindle with cop like that, or a spindle without cop. I've got one here. Just like so. If you were storing like a full-sized top whorl spindle, you could probably only fit 3 on this, but still, these are nice because they're super slim. They're very easy to put on a table.
They ship flat rate first class.
Well, that is nice too.
And you can also break them down and store them flat if you want to.
You can, although because of the tension fit, it can degrade over time. If you take them apart and put them back together with great frequency, it can mess up the little pieces. So we don't recommend doing that any more than you strictly have to. We also have the double wide. So you can see that one holds up to 10 spindles. This one has also been treated with a finish. If you're going to treat them with a finish, and they're left unfinished specifically so you can stain them or put whatever treatment you want on them or even paint them, definitely do it after you've assembled it, because the oils can get absorbed by the wood and result in the pieces not going together very well anymore.
Wood swells.
Yeah, so you definitely want to make sure that if you're going to finish them, you assemble it first. But this holds up to 10 spindles. And again, like the one that holds only 5, very, very easy to take them and hide them around the house. You just put like one tray here and one tray over there and one tray on the bookshelves on the main level,
or 8 trays down here and 5 trays upstairs.
Because I don't feel the need to be subtle, and you keep giving me spindles. What am I supposed to do?
Giving.
Yes. Okay. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. So if you have a large collection that you need to disperse around the house to make it a little more subtle, so people don't realize just exactly how many you have, the slim storage stands are a good option there. We also have what we call the tote life spindle storage solution. Ooh, hey, I can see my reflection in the plastic. That's really cool.
And we didn't turn blue.
So this is, how many did we say this holds? Like 20, 25? 5 by 5. Yes, it can hold up to 25 spindles depending upon the shape of the spindle. This plywood piece ships flat. It has to be assembled and glued. Once you get it, we are working on a video tutorial that demonstrates the gluing process. It may or may not have the elf voice in it.
It will have the elf voice in it.
Apparently it will have the elf voice in it. And
elves make stuff.
Well, that is true. And then this just fits nicely into a hefty high-rise tote. The Spanish Peacock website, we've got a link to the listing on Target, but you can also get them at Walmart if you're lucky.
Right now it's tough to find them anywhere because
we found a few at Walmart with blue lids.
Right. And we found one at Target that was designated as a decoration storage.
It was for holding ornaments, right? So it had
Right.
these extra cardboard bits that we, of course, just threw in the recycling bin. And
as things calm down,
I just
a
liked them
little bit,
because of the red lids.
as things calm down, they'll become more available again.
Right. I mean, it's just the assumption
I
that
hope.
they're made in China, so, COVID. You just blame COVID for pretty much anything that's not going our way anymore.
Exactly.
So we have been looking into
Different totes.
or making an engineering change to the tote life stand to make it so it could be freestanding.
Right.
So that people could go ahead and buy it, glue it, and have it assembled so it can at least store their spindles safely, even if it didn't have the benefit of the hard plastic around it to really
Right.
help the spindles.
The nice thing about the tote life is, I mean, you can stack them 6 high.
It's a good thing.
No.
It's a good thing. I keep swiping his.
Yeah. I bought 2 the other day. I don't know where either of them is now.
Well, those were the ones that had the blue lids. I like blue.
Huh.
But so now I'm going to need spindles to go with the tote life totes. Because I need to have them coordinate. And then I'll need fiber to go with them.
I'll see to that next holiday. You just got a new bob and you just got fiber to match the bob.
But it's not here yet.
It will be.
It will be. If USPS ever unclusters itself.
From Australia.
Ugh. It's going to take forever. Luckily, I have plenty of other things to spin in the meantime.
There you go.
So
And plenty of other podcasts to do.
And plenty of other podcasts too. So, yeah, we'll get to that in a second too. So, the other thing we were going to discuss is if you do end up with a spindle that has some wobble to it, what are your options? So, we've already discussed the first and easiest option is just go ahead and spin with it anyway. So, we'll see. Can we switch to... Nope, there is no cell cam anymore. It went to sleep. Oh well. So don't. No, just don't.
Okay.
No. So this, I mean, we can see Wobbly Boy just fine. So you can see just by adding a certain amount of cop onto the spindle, it adds a weight closer to the shaft and helps create a stabilizing influence. So in this particular case, I'm actually experimenting with different cop shapes. So we have here the more ovoid shape. Normally I spin more of or wrap, I guess I should say, more of a column. So I'm experimenting with different options to see if one versus the other produces more of a stabilizing effect. So stay tuned for the results of that particular experiment. The other thing you can do if it's a supported spindle and the spindle wobble isn't too bad, and this is going to sound crazy, it sounds like voodoo every single time I say it, try spinning the spindle in a different bowl. It doesn't make sense. Why would one spindle and one bowl get along and a different spindle and the same bowl not get along? If I hadn't seen it in person, I wouldn't have believed it, but it's absolutely true. So we've got a large number of different types of bowls, and whenever a spindle seems like it may have an issue, we start running around the house checking it in different bowls just to see if it's a bowl issue or a spindle bowl agreement issue. I don't know how to put that. There's got to be some fancier way to say that. Versus something actually wrong with the spindle itself. A lot of times, too, if you just spin it directly on your hand, it's not going to spin as well as it would in a bowl. So those are 2 options. A third option would be to store the spindle straight up and down. Again, it could be in one of our storage totes. It could be in anything that's just going to provide it with the chance to acclimate, especially if it underwent. Especially if it had undergone, that's what I was trying to say, traumatic shipping situations.
Oh, you mean,
like most of our stuff in Christmas.
You mean the post office?
Yes.
I shouldn't say that. They're trying.
They're very trying. So if it shows up and you unpack it and you're like, what happened? This isn't what I thought I was getting. Absolutely try storing it straight up and down.
Yeah, let it relax for a while.
Yeah, let it acclimate to its new environment and give it a shot.
Wood
after a little
is
bit.
alive.
Yeah.
I mean, it's going to, it will undergo changes.
And sometimes it'll improve, sometimes it won't improve.
Right.
I mean, that is unfortunately the fact of the matter. Sometimes the exposure that it suffered isn't recoverable.
Post-traumatic stress.
Post-USPS stress.
Yeah, post-USPS stress.
one of the other things that you can do is just spin with a spindle anyway. Even though it's got a certain amount of wobble, the point of the spindle is to put twist into fiber in order to make a yarn. And there have been very, very few spindles over the years that were so bad that I couldn't use them. There have been a handful. Honestly, the zebra wood one is just really, really bad.
Yeah, that's well. You don't get any decent spin out of that just because there's no
Right.
time.
But you could spin with it, even if it has a significant amount of wobble. It's still something you could do.
People used to spin with rocks tied onto sticks. There's a bug trying to fly into my mouth.
Little extra
Sorry.
protein.
You're not seeing it?
Yeah, I wasn't planning on editing any of this, so.
Oh, okay. Hey, I'm gonna eat a bug, so it's gonna be fun.
As long
Peacocks eat bugs.
do that?
I don't know. They're birds. I'm sure they do. Worms,
I would've-
bugs,
Huh.
caterpillars.
I would have expected
Small
them to eat
rocks.
primarily like grains and stuff,
Well, you know,
but I don't know.
beggars can't be choosers. Seriously,
There he goes.
it's flying in my mouth.
Better in the
Sorry.
mouth than up the nose, I suppose. Oh, now my nose itches.
He
just
really
now it
did
said
fly
that.
in my mouth. There
So
you go.
I think
Added
that was it.
content.
Right? I think that was all that we wanted to cover with the podcast. Was there anything else that we didn't say that we missed? I think that was it.
No, I don't think so.
Oh, I did. I forgot to talk about Spindle storage options on the go. Because
Oh.
it's been so long since we've last gone anywhere.
Gone anywhere, yeah.
We forget about that. I'm a big fan of the wine box. This is the type of cardboard box that you could just pick up at Joann's or Michael's or any arts and crafts store.
They're not bulletproof, but daggone near.
They're pretty good. If you're supported spinning and so you have a bowl, just make sure you put the bowl in the bottom.
Sid would disagree with you.
Just make sure to put the bowl in the bottom and try to pack some fiber around the spindle to help support it and keep it up and down while it's in transport. If you're actually traveling and going anywhere, because Lord knows I haven't gone anywhere since.
March. Yeah. March.
Where did we go in March? I don't think we. Oh, you went somewhere. You went somewhere in February, but I didn't go with you.
What about the beach? When did we go to the beach?
Oh, that would have been August. So yeah, okay. I have traveled with Spindles.
Oh, that was the COVID downtime.
Right.
Hey,
right.
we're good. Travel.
Right, because, well, and we didn't have to leave Maryland to do it, so we
True.
didn't technically break any out-of-state laws or travel restrictions as far as that goes. And then I also have a project bag that I've been using more lately.
This came from you.
Yeah, so this is just a soft-sided bag, and basically it just holds my spindle and fiber in it. The bag is big enough and was actually designed so that you could keep your spindle bowl in it as well, but I personally prefer to keep the bowl in a separate bag. So I'll stick this with the spindle in it inside the another bag, and then just carry the bowl and my lotion in that bag so they don't bang up the spindle. Goodwaterandco.com is who made this. We were actually supposed to carry their project bags at Shenandoah Valley Fiber Festival this year. Yet another
And
COVID casualty.
Till it got canceled
Right.
or virtualized.
So if you're using a soft-sided project bag, that's fine too. Just same thing. Make sure it stays more or less up and down and that there's nothing that can put pressure on the shaft and mess it up. Okay. Now, is there anything that I forgot to talk about? I don't
Nope.
think so. I think that's it. Okay, great. Yay. So thank you so much for joining us for today's podcast. Hope you enjoyed it and learned a lot and didn't laugh too much at us, except when we were being funny and wanted you to laugh.
And here we go with the elf voice again.
Well, you know, just a little.
Just a little elf.
So we're not going to really edit it. We're just going to kind of put this thing out there. Because editing sucked the first time.
Yeah.
And the second. And the fifth. And
and 197th.
Right, so here it is. We're idiots.
Right.
Thanks for sharing a little bit of time with us.
Turn down the elf voice.
There you go.
Thank you. So our next podcast will be a 2020 year in review and 2021 look ahead. So hope you guys will join us for that. I don't know if we'll be doing that as a video or
Bring
we'll
your
just
own
stick-
bottle.
Bring your own beverage. We may be doing that not on the video. We'll see. It depends upon how big of a bottle we've got, I guess.
Yeah, videos are
we'll
fun.
see. We'll see. And I think that's it. So again, thank you very much for spending some time with us. Really appreciate you guys. You look like you're about to say something.
I was going to do the podcaster thing that I see all the people. Make sure you check, like, and subscribe on the bottom. I don't even know how that works because I've never done this.
If you've enjoyed the podcast, definitely give us a thumbs up on our YouTube video. Subscribe to the channel so that you can get updates and notifications about future posts. Again, this is our first time doing a video podcast, so if you prefer a audio version of the podcast, definitely check us out, the Peahen's Ponderings, on whatever your preferred podcasting service is. And we'll have more tutorials and other videos posted to this YouTube channel.
Yeah, we should have the assembly for
Yes, the
Tote
Tote
Life
Life
up soon.
Assembly. Yeah, we just have to finish fighting over whether or not the entire thing's going to be done
Elf
in the elf
voice.
voice. And of course, if you have any other questions about supported spinning in particular or spinning in general, you can check out my website, thepeahenspod.com. There's a lot of good information there. Strangely, almost all of it about Spanish Peacock spindles. I'm not really sure why that is. I have good taste. So anyway, again, thanks for spending some time with us. And remember, you keep making beautiful fiber arts, and the Spanish Peacock will help. Okay, I might have to edit that one.
You're going to have to edit a little bit.
I'm going to have to edit a little bit. You keep making beautiful fiber arts, and Spanish Peacock will keep making beautiful tools to help you do so. Thank you. Bye.